Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're going to be reviewing Voyager by Cailyn Lloyd.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
So after looking for this album for a couple of minutes on Spotify, I started realizing that maybe it wasn't there, maybe it just wasn't on the library of Spotify, but then suddenly I finally realized where it was and I discovered it, and I saw that on the page of Cailyn Lloyd she had 2 monthly listeners on Spotify, which definitely makes this album the least known album I've ever reviewed and ever reviewed on this list. So I knew that I was getting into something special, and Cailyn, if you're watching this video, I am your 3rd monthly listener. But anyways, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. So although being by far the least known album on this list, I was very surprised to see that this album specifically and the artist had a page on Prog Archives, and more than that, it had 5 written reviews on it. Like, I don't know if you know, I don't know if you visit the Prog Archives, but it doesn't have a lot of written reviews and a lot of ratings, but this album had quite a few people that had something to say about it, and those reviews really came in handy when researching about this album. So as a slight introduction, who is Cailyn Lloyd? Now, Cailyn Lloyd is an American songwriter, and she basically started off playing young the piano, and then she moved on to learn the violin and the bass before opting to play the guitar as her lead instrument, but she did that while also learning the drums as well. And after some midlife hiatus of raising a family, she came back to music and started creating some of her own works, being the first one that came out in 2012, being 4 pieces, and then creating a second album in 2016, being the album we are reviewing today, called Voyager. And while by definition you might call this album a concept album, I prefer not to look at it like that, but as an album with an overarching idea. The idea of this is much like The Planet by Gustav Holst, and it's basically a soundtrack for the celestial bodies found in our solar system. And the song progression and structure on here is very correlated to the Voyager missions. And if you don't know about the Voyager missions, they are basically 2 satellites which were launched from Earth into space, and they gave a few pass-bys by several planets and moons, and they discovered a lot of things about them while doing research until they both exited out of the heliosphere, which is basically the surrounding shell we have on the solar system. And the songs in their order is basically the order in which each Voyager has met each planet on its way. So I myself, as a big space fan, I love everything about space. From my childhood, I've been reviewing and doing some stuff about planets and stuff like that. Honestly, I remember myself making PowerPoint presentations about different moons when I was like 9, which is so nerdy and stuff like that, but I like it very, very much. And when seeing what the concept of this album was going to be, I got more excited about that than actually discovering what Cailyn Lloyd was capable of. So this album opens up with the track called Voyager. Now this track, you can say that it sounds kind of like a launch of the spacecraft into space. It has this really grandiose moments on it which can correlate to that, Now, right from this first track, I realized something about the way that Cailyn plays. She is very talented. She can do a lot of things, but as it seems, she kind of flexes all the time and does over-the-top things in places which they're not really needed. And while The Planets by Gustav Holst really does do a fantastic job at going down and going up depending on what the music really correlates with the planet themselves, I think that Cailyn really goes over the top most of the time and sometimes goes down, but honestly in not the right fashion. So while her guitar playing is really good and she can shred her guitar and do amazing solos, it all feels kind of pretentious at times. And I think that the thing that she really misses out on is creating some connection from the music to the listener. Because as I see it, Cailyn takes a way off approach to progressiveness, and everything is too shifting and too changing all the time in a way that doesn't even let each section build up on itself and elaborate on themselves and letting the listener actually connect to the music, because once you hear something, you know it's gonna be gone in a few seconds time. But despite all that I'm saying, and I will say throughout this review, this album is still really good. It's like supreme level music. She plays fantastically on here, and I had a great time listening to it, although I do have some more criticisms towards this album. So I won't go into each track, but I do have some tracks to note out and one overarching criticism that I have towards this album. So deciding to do this idea about the planets and the moons in our solar system is really cool, and I think that what she should have utilized most is the unique characteristics of each celestial body in the creation of its track. So for example, a place where she has done it quite right is the second track called Io. Now that is personally my favorite moon in the solar system. Of course, everyone has a favorite moon in the solar system, and that's totally normal for everyone to do. But what I like about it is the fact that it has this really rupturing part, which to me at least is supposed to correlate with the huge, probably the biggest active volcano in the solar system that exists on Io. And that's really cool because that's a place where the actual characteristics of the moon correlate to the music. Another place which I really like that usage is the song Enceladus, which talks about one of the moons, which is basically very icy and has this ice cover all the way through it, and the song itself really does feel and make me feel cold and sounds like being played on ice. But then you have the songs which really don't do that all that well, and one song has to be Uranus. I said Uranus. And this is one of those planets which is really stale and doesn't have a lot to it, yet the music on here is very bombastic, very grandiose, very hard hitting. For no apparent reason, I don't see how this correlates to the planet itself. And maybe the prime example for it has to come on the track Triton. Now, Triton is one of the moons of Neptune, and the thing about Triton is it's a very odd celestial body, and it doesn't act like the regular moons which are formed by debris after an impact with the planet itself. Triton is basically an unknown object which latched on to Neptune and became an unwilling moon to it. And one of the things that it does, unlike any other moon in the solar system, is that it orbits Neptune in the wrong direction. So while every moon orbits Neptune in a counterclockwise fashion, Triton actually orbits it in a clockwise manner. Now, I think Cailyn should have and could have used the very fantastic characteristic like this in order to make something great out of the song, and the thing that I was expecting at least is a usage of reversed samples of music on here, or heck, even an entire song which is played in reverse, because that's how Triton orbits Neptune, in reverse. And while we have a song like Pale Blue Dot, which obviously refers to this image over here in which we can see Earth from Voyager's view very far away looking as a pale blue dot, that song really does capture some sense of distance, of isolation, and longing to be back home. The last song on here, which is called Heliopause, which basically means when Voyager has left the heliosphere, which is the surrounding sphere around our solar system, and into basically oblivion, that track doesn't really capture the melancholy and isolation that it is to be referred to in Voyager going off into space for what seems like an eternity of nothingness. And in a way, it really ends off this album in a very underwhelming manner, and this last track specifically isn't helped by the guest star playing the drums. So unlike all the other songs in which Cailyn does most of the instrumentation, we have only a few guest stars on here, some on the vocals I think, we have someone on the cello on the third track, and then we have Neil Hallman on the last track playing the drums. And I really hate the way he plays. He plays awfully. I have no idea why he's on here. He plays like a robot. It's very over the top. It's mostly schematic. I don't like the things that he does for a song like this. It really brought me out of the mood of this album, and that's such a bummer when it comes to the end of an album. But in spite of all my criticism, honestly, this album is pretty good. It's a fairly nice album to listen to. It's not something that I would pay to own at any time soon, but it's definitely something that I would think about if I want some really nice background music, but some, you know, progressive rock space music. So I will think about it the next time I do my chores. But yes, if you're one of those people that feel like they've listened to a lot of progressive rock music and they know a lot of things and they want to discover more, this is definitely one of those albums which is right there for you to discover. So go ahead, check up Cailyn Lloyd's Voyager. I can tell you, you wouldn't be disappointed. It's maybe not a masterpiece, but it's definitely some kind of piece. I have no idea why Cailyn opted to use a cover like this. Like, this cover is way over the top. Like, a lot of the music, it doesn't feel related to the music like at all. I don't get what it has to do with the music on here. The music feels very isolated, very, you know, spacey, but in the way that it's just isn't surrounded by a lot of things. Then, you know, in some way the music on here feels like Voyager is excited of seeing a new celestial body, so it starts singing in some way and making its own music. But this cover just isn't any of that. It's from Earth's point of view. It looks at the skies, it sees supernovas, and there's no reason for it because we're not talking about supernovas in this one. And honestly, it seems like Cailyn was just going to the artist, commissioning an artwork that has to do something about space, and the first thing that was created was this thing, and they just went with it, and I don't like it at all. I think a better cover could have even been an image of Voyager just going around in space doing basically nothing, and that would have been a whole lot better. But yeah, this nice album receives a very expected score of 7 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're gonna be listening to A Momentary Lapse of Reason by Pink Floyd, the only Pink Floyd album which I have never heard. So stay tuned for that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.